have you all with us. I'm faculty coordinator for Creative Citizens in Action. It is my pleasure to be able to say that we are here with some wonderful folks tonight. And before we even get started, I want to do a land acknowledgement. Then we'll have some introductions. And I'll also tell you a little bit about Creative Citizens in Action. Okay. So California College of the Arts campuses are located in Huichen and Yelamu, also known as Oakland and San Francisco, respectively, on the unceded territories of Chochenyo and Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who have continuously lived upon this land since time immemorial. We recognize the historic discrimination and violence inflicted upon Indigenous peoples in California and the Americas, including their forced removal from ancestral lands and the deliberate and systemic destruction of their communities and culture. At CCA, we honor Indigenous people, past, present, and future, here and around the world, and we wish to pay respect to our local elders, including those of the lands from which you are joining us virtually today. If you are unsure of whose land you are currently residing upon, you can find out. We encourage you to visit native/land at, nativeland.ca. And I'll put that in the chat as well. So we understand that this land acknowledgement by itself is only a small gesture. It becomes meaningful when coupled with authentic relationships and informed actions, and a lot of work. So the folks here today, I'll let them speak for themselves, but they're a part of doing that work. And I just want to say thank you to Jocelyn Jackson, artist who's representing People's Kitchen Collective, Conrad Guevara, an artist representing Real Time and Space and Town Fridge, Larissa Gilbert, an artist representing the Oxbow School in collaboration with 2727 California, Lexa Walsh, an artist representing Oakland Stock. This event will be co-moderated by myself and student fellow Manisha Ganesh, also with the support of our amazing exhibitions team, Jamie Austin, Director of Exhibitions, and Brandice, who's also working with exhibitions as well as the gallery manager. Thank you both. A bit about Creative Citizens in Action. It's a college-wide initiative that promotes creative activism and democratic engagement through public programs, exhibitions, and curriculum connections. This program is funded by a new endowment. It's a gift to launch the Deborah and Kenneth Novak Creative Citizen Series, an annual series of public programs focused on creative activism that spans the disciplines of art, design, architecture, and writing. It's overseen by the Exhibitions and Public Programming Department in partnership with Student Affairs, libraries, academic divisions, communications, and faculty. So this is part one of the Town Hall Forum organized by myself and Manisha. We want to focus on food, access, labor, land ownership, and intersections with art and activism as a dynamic way to bring our international and local creative communities together after the election. And, you know, I want to just say that Manisha introduced a quote to me written by Avni Doshi. And the quote says, "If feeding is a form of love, eating is a kind of submission. Meals are conversations, and what we don't say is left over in the food." So this conversation tonight is meant to be a loving shout out to the creative members of our community. We know that during the protests this summer, the amount of direct action work and mutual aid skyrocketed to create lasting change in our society. And we want to uplift our community in the aftermath of the election and focus on how food and those who are feeding us are feeding not only our bodies, but our hearts and our minds through their creative art activism that is integral to our survival on this planet. The conversation tonight, we hope, will set the groundwork for questions and engagements around topics that will be discussed in smaller groups with our school community, faculty, students, and artists, visiting artists, for part 2 of Second Helping. So if you or someone you know would like to lead a small working group on the topics discussed tonight, please be in contact with exhibitions@cca.edu. So now that we have all the introductions out of the way, I just want to say thanks again for being here. And now we're going to hear from our incredible panel of artists, activists. We're going to start off the event with the esteemed Jocelyn Jackson, who I have been wanting to meet ever since I moved to the Bay Area 3 years ago. So it's so nice to be in Zoom company with you, Jocelyn. Jocelyn is the founder of Just Us Kitchen, which creates healing food experiences that inspire folks to reconnect with themselves, the earth, and one another, with the goal of collective liberation. Jocelyn is also co-founder of the People's Kitchen Collective, based in Oakland, California. It's a large-scale community dining project that uses food and art to address the critical issues of our time while centering the lived experiences of Black and Brown folks. So at this time, I just want to give it over to Jocelyn. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sam. The feeling is mutual. Thank you for your work in the world and bringing it every day. I am so just grateful to be invited to this conversation. As you know, we've had the opportunity to have many conversations about what it means to be alive and in the movement in this time where there is so much that is on fire. And it is imperative for our groups that I work with to really be in alignment with the primary goal of our work, which is amplifying the voices and well-being of Black and Brown folks in our community. With Justice Kitchen, I am specifically honoring, amplifying, and raising up the voices of Black women and femmes. And with People's Kitchen Collective, it's the same centering and, in effect, decentering of whiteness that is part of our project that feels essential to healing so much that has not been acknowledged in our society's past and in the world's entire history. So we have large things to tend to, but we're doing it relationship by relationship, community by community. And that feels like the most authentic way that we can proceed. And what I would like to do is really give you a sense of this moment of before and after. You know, we live every single day of our life with before and after moments. And we can acknowledge that moment. You know, what was it before this? What was it after? And so in order to sort of set a guidepost for us of what our work has been in the past, as far as this idea of gathering together, I want to share a video with you of our streets meal. It was a 500-person meal on a long table down 2 city blocks in 2018. It was created with the help of a social art practice grant from the Kenneth Rainin Foundation. And it's very important to us to be explicit about that combination of art, social justice, and food, and what that combination of things and concentrations can really create. And by way of that, I'll share that one of the co-founders is Sita Bomek, and she is a longtime instructor at CCA and also attended. And also Saqib Kaval. The three of us and all of our multiplicities co-created People's Kitchen Collective. And it's very much at the heart of this idea that we can do so much more when we do it together than we can as individuals. So with all of that, I'd love to share with you now the video from our streets meal, which was the culmination of a 4-part series from the farm to the kitchen, to the table, to the streets in 2018. And I had a great tutorial just now, so I think everything's gonna go well with this share. Oh yeah. There we go.
Gather together and call the name. The Acorn Project's Campbell Village Court, Cypress Village. Gather together and call the name, Clausen and the Desert Yard. Gather together and call the name, Dogtown and Ghost Town and Foster. Gather together and call the name, Prescott, Port, and Ralph Bunch. Look for all the same differences in our bodies. Lips that we know are full with kiss, noses that we know swell and shine, foreheads that soak sun and reflect moon, hair that naps tight with curl. Be told we are sons and daughters from a long line of sons and daughters. We who have been taught to forget are remembering our own today, and we will tell and retell, write and overwrite our stories and our histories and our recipes. And it looks like you, brown and browner. It smelled like you, earth and musk. It's strong like you, backs and shoulders. It's soft like you, hold and stroke. It sound like you, Esther's Orbit Lounge, drums and jazz. Do you hear it today? In the song that swayed to, the song that makes you close your eyes, shake your head and slow nose and beg to have your burdens lifted to. It's a song that lulled the baby on the hip, the song that saved the captured on the ship. It's the song that said, tonight we run to freedom, and the night and the song has always been ours. The no more auction block for me, the precious Lord, take my hand, the come by here, Lord, come by here. Do you hear it tonight? Do you feel it tonight? It's rolling in like a spirit riding a storm through West Oakland. Listen to the calm in your bones. Listen to the trees cry, and they do. Listen to all things that warn you to hold on, and hold on to him and to her like this, like sea gripping land, like night blanketing stars, like shore spreading, pulling rivers through, like east and west wind fighting to hold on to one another as they turn in wild tornado. Can you feel it? Just like justice and the shakes before an earthquake. Can you feel it? Like coming home from jail and the itch in your palm when payday is near. Can you feel it? Just like the still confounding prophetic, like the still bird song before an eruption. Can you feel it rolling in like a spirit riding a storm? The tear, the anger, the veil, the funeral, the eulogy, the food, the cremation, the scattering, the babies, the rebirth, the re-entry, the return, the beloved, the bashed, the fight, the guns, the vigil, the night, the march, the protest, the growth, the scream, the community, the voices, the prayer, the hold, the strength, the night, the farm, the table, the street. And you, who have prayed to sun gods, know that love is nothing if not a ritual. And you who have held on to centuries know that survival is nothing new. And you who have gone inside one another know that it is deep enough to hide one another. So gather together and call the name, son and daughter, in the club and bar, until it burns in the roof of our mouths. Gather together and call the name, father and mother, in the home and house, until it melts like butter candy under the tongue. Gather together and call the name, grandfather and grandmother, in the kitchen and in the shed, until it runs through thick like blood. Gather together and call the name, uncle and aunt, in the church and choir, until it raises our voices and cries to gospel. Gather together and call the name, brother and sister, in the park and bush, until our tastes are all satisfied. Gather together and call the names until.
And I invite all of us to really take a breath in together and exhale together. And just sit with the enjoyment of what it was to see 500 people gloriously, joyfully gathering together without masks on, enjoying one another's company. celebrating, and as you saw in the last bit of that film, and also grieving and mourning together. It's really a clear piece of PKC's vision that we are constantly in that place of joy and sorrow. We can gather together at a really specific place, an intersection of history, present, and future, where we're acknowledging our forebears and our ancestors. Many of them in the Oakland area are from the Black Panther Party tradition of social service programs, as well as artist activists that are always in the work at the forefront. And with those relationships and those collaborations and with that collective visioning, co-creating a space that is acknowledging what has happened in these spaces, whether it's gentrification, whether it's state violence, and taking the opportunity to celebrate that we survive and we are thriving, and that we are living our action on a daily basis. With that, it's really important to say that how do we create that space? How do we create that feeling in a world that dictates that we not gather together in the same way? How do we create experiences that are held by artistic impression, but also activist intention? And for us, that was really looking at, our history and mutual aid, and how does our audience change? How does our access and our attention to access change in the face of pandemic and in the face of acknowledging the daily hurt and, like I said, the daily standing in the fire of social unrest that is a part of our daily lives. And for us, that was very much taking a look at how we looked at free breakfast program. Each year we are part of Life is Living in West Oakland. I know many of you know it. And it's one of our favorite traditions to do the free breakfast program that honors the legacy of the Black Panther Party survival programs. And it is something that is usually serving up to 800 people. We wanted to do the same, but do it in a way where access was different and where our audience was really tended to. And so what we were able to create was sort of a 4-part experience where we had more donations than we've ever had based on the need. And the need that we basically created for us was, how do we serve 600 in a socially responsible way, and in a way that is arts forward, that is social justice forward, and that is ancestor forward. And so I want to give a little look at what that means. And again, relying on my tutorial to get you all the right information as I push escape on some buttons and do a little something over here to make sure it all comes together. And it is there. Great. And this is just to show you again that we were able to do a pandemic pivot. What our shift and what our adaptation required was, how do we be of service? And it really meant that we were tending to the reality of our community in West Oakland in a new way. And that really meant for us to reach out to many, many new people that we were collaborating with, but also many of the people that you just saw in the film. We did 600 beloved community bags of food and resources, including library book, food from Alameda Food Bank. We also did different pieces of donations from local groups like Rainbow Grocery Co-op that has been donating to even Black Panther Party back in the 60s. They were part of that. As you can see in this photo, the Black Community Survival Conference was held at Defremery Park the same way Life is Living is held there now. And Rainbow was a part of it even back then. So really relying on new and existing relationships to create something that was had an impact that was as great as we could, but with the same amount of purpose and intention as our in-person gatherings. And after the Beloved Community Bag, which you see here, we also did 200 free breakfast cook-along bags. And for that, it meant that we were doing cook-along on Saturday of the week of the free breakfast. And people got a bag of supplies to cook the meal with us. And, that is, let me see if I can get this correct. And that is something where we wanted to have that experience of gathering together, and we had the opportunity to do it virtually instead of in person. And we invited Makam Hum, we invited Marvin K. White, who you saw present that poem, Gather Together. We invited some of the usual peoples that are part of this experience of us creating social art together in order to create this experience virtually and to still have something physical and tangible for people to hold and to lay their hands on and to cook with. It's as if we were cooking the same things at the same time in different places, and that really gave us a sense of connection when we're in this place that is so necessary but uncomfortable of not being able to be in each other's presence in the same way. And we also were able to do a hot breakfast to the kids at Diffremery Park who are virtual learning. And that meant walking through, as they were outside playing tennis, we walked into the empty space where all these tables are set up for kids that are 7, 8 years old to have their laptop computer and have virtual learning at their independent individual tables, and delivered food for them to eat on that Friday. And so that was very much in the heart of what the spirit of Black Panther Party and our ancestors tell us about mutual aid and caring for and creating heart in these experiences. So just wanted to give you this sense of what it is for us to be in our before and after of social practice, of mutual aid, and of continuing with the community and the collective that we've already built in order to expand what is possible in the way that we are present for our community. Because this food and this menu is something that has historical reference points for our folks. These greens and these sweet potato biscuits, this tofu scramble provided by Horo Soy every year is something that people look to, and the grits as well. And it's something that has heart attached to it. It has presence connected to it. And it really is a foundational piece of walking through the world right now in the best way that we can to reinforce that we still can be here, we can still be present in a way that is activated by our true creative hearts and our true activist nature, and really looking forward to all the different ways that this experience created even more opportunities for us to expand. And I'm going to leave it there. And I would love to turn back to Sam to make the next transition to the next presenter. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Jocelyn, so much. I'm actually going to allow Manesia to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I just wanted to say that even when I was conceptualizing this event and even in my practice at large, I'm so inspired by the work that you and Sita do at People's Kitchen Collective. And I've always looked up to you, like ever since I moved to the Bay for school. So thank you so much. It was such a blessing to hear you speak. Next, I'm going to be introducing Larissa Gilbert. Larissa is an interdisciplinary artist, writer, and educator based in the North Bay. Their practice is largely concerned with cultural and media studies, queer theory, and social practice. They received their BFA from the Cooper Union in New York and currently teach full-time at the Oxbow School in Napa, California, where they have taught and co-taught classes on social practice and participatory art, contemporary nonfiction, creative writing, critical theory, sculpture, and film and video. This summer, they organized and participated in a mutual aid project in collaboration with the Oxbow School and 2727 California Street, offering 15 bi-weekly garden boxes to Black residents in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Thank you so much for that intro. I also just want to express like a huge amount of gratitude to Jocelyn and Sam and Manaja. What the work you're doing is like so astounding. It like took my breath away just watching that video. So I'm dreaming of a time when we can all, be together again and eat together and share conversations again. And in the meantime, we'll do it separately by ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so again, just thank you so much. And yeah, my name is Larissa, and I use they, them pronouns, and I'm currently on Nisenan land in Nevada City. And I just also want to acknowledge that it's Nisenan Heritage Month, and they're doing a fundraiser. So if you've ever like swam in the Yuba River, I would just consider donating whatever you can. They're doing like really, really amazing work here. Okay. So my my path is like at the very beginning stages of doing this type of work. So it's maybe a little bit intimidating following Jocelyn, but I kind of just like wanted to share my personal experience with like coming to the garden and sort of the impact it's had on my life, and then also sort of sharing the gifts of the garden and the profound impact that's had on my life. So during the pandemic, or right when the pandemic started, we had to send a lot of students home as many colleges and campuses shut down. We had to send our boarding students home. And there was this really strange sense of isolation on campus. Usually there's like so much community, we share tons of meals together, we have very intense conversations over those meals, and all of a sudden I felt this profound sense of isolation. I was really, really privileged to be able to stay on campus. And this is when I was first like really introduced to the gardening program at Oxbow. Because we like wear many hats, I was always really busy. And while the garden always like called me, I never really gave it the time it deserved. So yeah, I was in Napa, and I was witnessing like the beauty of the seasons in the spring. I'd never been there before. And a lot of people have come before me in that space, and they've sort of tended to the trees. There's so many fruit trees, so many beautiful lemon verbena plants, so many lavender plants. And when everything sort of felt out of control and stressful, I could just sort of go to the plants and smell them. And I was like filled with this sense of calm. And for the first time, I mean, I've always felt really grateful for the plants, but for the first time, I felt this like really, really deep and profound gratitude for the plants. And at the same time, while I felt that gratitude, I also felt extremely frustrated that I couldn't really share that with anyone. I really wanted to cook for people, as I love to do. I really wanted to, provide someone a lavender plant to smell when they were like feeling really stressed, especially like my friends and community in the cities. So yeah, I felt that the plants were changing my life in a really profound way. So this was one of the people that I was closest to during the beginning stages of the pandemic. This is Naveen, and she's one of the daughters of the history teacher. And I feel like I was able to sort of like see the garden through her eyes and the sort of impact it had on her. So when I was beginning farming, I came across Leah Penniman's work, and she runs a farm called Soulfire Farm in New York, and she does lots of educational programs specifically for Black farmers. And I just want to read this quote. She says, "I was hooked on farming. Something profound and magical happened to me as I learned to plant, tend, and harvest. I found an anchor in the simplicity of working the earth and sharing her bounty. What I was doing was good, right, and unconfused." And when I first read that, it resonated with me so intensely, because I think in a lot of ways I was sort of questioning or creating art and creating sculptures and creating more stuff. And she like really distilled it to this very like human base level thing where it just feels really good to be with the soil. And I had this realization that you can care for the land and care for the self and care for others all in one action. And I was completely blown away. I was completely blown away with the fact that if you plant like fava beans, you can actually like pull carbon out of the universe and you can fix and restore the soil. And I was also just like really grateful for the environmental science teacher who had taught so many people before me, and I was able to learn and hopefully in the future pass down what I've learned. So here's just like some small pictures of the garden at Oxbow, and these are some really beautiful snapdragons on the left, peaches and bush beans. And while I was sort of experimenting with my own small garden, Alex had lots of plans to plant in from greenhouse starters, hundreds and hundreds of plants. He decided that because of the pandemic, he was gonna plant as many plants as he possibly could within the space that we had. And kind of suddenly he had to go work in Minnesota. And because of my newfound love of gardening and the relationship I was developing with the plants, I took on the responsibility of sort of caring for the garden. So this is Naveen again. And really quickly, I realized that the amount of produce that was gonna be produced, we definitely could not eat it ourselves. And at the same time, there was this like growing need in me to like really share what these gifts from the earth. So I reached out to Lydia at 2727 California Street, and she was actually an alum of the Oxbow program. And it happened really naturally because she was already organizing other delivery services, free delivery services. Like there was a free dessert and like small gifts that she was giving out. And she already mobilized like lots of drivers to be able to make this happen. So we created about 15 garden boxes bi-weekly. Again, it was like a small farm, but I felt that like even these like small offerings would hopefully make some impact. And we were able to do it all summer to 15 Black residents in the East Bay in San Francisco. I think that switched. So at the same time, I was thinking a lot about mutual aid work and also social practice and also food justice work. And I was noticing this like inclination that I wanted to be doing more and like scaling up. And during that time, I came across Adrienne Maree Brown's work that was really, really impactful because she sort of introduced this idea of fractals, where if enough people create small changes in their community, that then it creates this whole network of widespread change. And this like really spoke to mutual aid for me. So I'm just gonna read this quote. She says, "Small is good, small is all. The large is a reflection of the small. Change is constant, be like water. There is always enough time for the right work. There is a conversation in the room that only these people at this moment can have. Find it. Never a failure, always a lesson. Trust the people. If you trust the people, they become trustworthy. Move at the speed of trust. Focus on critical connections more than critical mass. Build the resilience by building the relationships. Less prep, more presence. What you pay attention to grows." So at the beginning, when we started creating the boxes, it was a lot more spring produce. There was lots of peaches, there was lots of fresh herbs, lemons. And then as we sort of moved into the summer, we got these really incredible summer vegetables like peppers and tomatoes. And when I was able to sort of like share these goods with community, and offer it at no cost, farming like really came full circle to me. I think like that's when Leah Penniman's work really spoke to me. It just felt really uncomplicated when being an artist sometimes feels really complicated. And also just sort of like realizing that this can be an artistic practice. Growing food can be an artistic practice. Eating food can be an artistic practice. And in this like small act of growing food, I felt like I was able to sort of combat so many systems in just that really simple act. And I began to look at farming too as in and of itself as a act of mutual aid. So in the sense that, like, if you pay attention to the soil and if you care for the soil, it'll care for you back. And this is something that I really believe like every single person should have the opportunity to experience. So here's just some more pictures. There's eggplant. And so here's just some pictures of different boxes. And it was really important that I didn't maybe just include the sustenance or the food, even though of course, like, we need the food and that's the most important part. I felt like the flowers and the herbs provided like a different level of healing that I felt was important. So like here, there's a lemon verbena to make tea. So I'm gonna end with this quote. And this text is an incredible text, and I hope that everyone's read it here. But it's a text called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And when I read this book, it really transformed my relationship with producing. She talks about this concept called the honorable harvest, that where whenever you pick up a pen or you have a piece of paper, that you really have to make that paper worthy. And she says that type of pressure can almost lead any writer to like put down their pen. So I'll just read this quote and then I'll be done. So Joanna Macy writes that until we can grieve for our planet, we cannot love it. Grieving is a sign of spiritual health. It is not enough to weep for our lost landscapes. We have to put our hands in the earth to make ourselves whole again. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily and I must return the gift. Awesome. So thank you so much. And I will turn it back to Sam.
Thank you so much, Larissa. What a beautiful array of photos, and can't wait to ask you more about it. But we're going to now have some words from Conrad. Conrad Guevara is an artist living in Albany, California. Conrad completed a BFA in printmaking from the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina in 2008, and completed an MFA in painting from the San Francisco Art Institute in 2013. Conrad works together in a mix of abstract painting and sculpture that's concerned with resistance, balance, improvisation, and economical means of assemblage. Conrad is 1/3 of Bonanza, a collaborative practice with Lana Williams and Lindsay Tully, established in 2012 with exhibitions at the De Rosa Contemporary Art Center, Gallery 16, the Recology Artist in Residence Program, and the Buffalo Institute of Contemporary Art. Conrad is a studio member of Real Time and Space in Oakland, where he has been since 2013. He also hosts an interview talk show on his Instagram Live called Getting to Know All About You with CG, which raises money for mutual aid initiatives in the Bay Area. Conrad and Bonanza are currently working on a fashion line with Creativity Explored, opening at the Museum of Craft and Design in late 2021. Conrad also has a forthcoming solo show at Right Window Gallery opening March of next year. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Conrad to the group. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I also wanted to just quickly also jump on the train of just being just so excited to be in the same Zoom as you, Jocelyn. Wow. And I'm very excited to speak all of you. I'm going to start sharing my screen. I am a little nervous. We'll see how that goes. And here we go. Okay, present. I've successfully avoided Zoom for most of quarantine too, so I do appreciate you like helping me through this time. Let's see if this will load. No, okay. Let me try that again. Okay, so my nightmare is currently happening, but we're just gonna breathe through that.
You're doing great. Take your time.
You got this, Conrad.
I feel it, it's here, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so first off, I'm Conrad Guevara. And the kind of story of like what I wanted to share with you has so much to do with my Instagram addiction and just the way that we have to communicate now. And I spend just way too much time on there in a mix of doom scrolling and liking Ikebana and bird watching accounts. This is where a lot of like, I feel like my art practice has moved to, which feels so strange. I just wanted to kind of start with a sculpture that I really love. This is a piece that I made last year. It's called Meters, and it has a second nickname in my head. It's Side Hustle. Just like, there's a note about it. This particular assemblage, I wanted to kind of tap into the inventiveness of like and casual elegance of like a mom and pop noodle restaurant. Things are practical and beautiful, a little silly, but they all function in some way. And it's inspired by a teacher I had at the San Francisco Art Institute, Richard Berger. And he had this amazing, this thing hit me over the head with art. He just said, so simply just put two things together and just cut off the ugly part. And I think about that every day in my studio when I'm here. It blew my mind. Anyway, okay. So that's just like a little bit about my like individual artist sensibility, but I also work with two other people in a collaborative practice called Bonanza, a name that we inherited in 2012 and we decided to stick with. Here are my co-conspirators in that. Lindsay is in the middle, Lindsay Tully, and Lana Williams is on the right. We met in grad school, and I guess like I would not recommend going to art school anymore, but I did meet these two people who have changed my life in art school, so I guess I do recommend it in some capacity. These two people have changed my life in the way that I think about artwork. And initially we kind of like build ourselves as a collaborative practice that mixes painting, sculpture, and video. I make sculpture, Lana makes painting, Lindsay makes video. We've kind of morphed into more of like a kind of do it yourself, do anything that you've ever wanted to try art collaborative practice. We make clothing, and we did that with the Ecology Artist in Residency program. We're also really into stand-up comedy and we've been trying to host more events. Specifically, it's called That's Funny, like stand up for artists who've never done it before. Just so everyone can practice having a hard five, just in case you get famous. So I just wanted to kind of also talk about like the collaborative practice that I'm really after in my artwork currently. This place has changed my life. It's Real Time and Space. That's the Instagram, that's the website. Sam, hello, RTS. Lexa, hello, RTS. I've met so many people. I've learned so much here. I've spent so much time alone in this space. It feels like it's my other home. And this is where we're at in Oakland. We're in between Chinatown and the Lake Merritt BART stop. This is the facade back in 2012 when Emma Spertus started it. We still maintain the Harrington McInnes Printers Company, and we do get a lot of questions about it. I should also say that like somehow we have a parking lot, and it is an amazing space, and I can't believe that we have that. RTS also functions as a residency program. This is the Black Salt Collective giving an artist talk at the end of their residency a few years ago. And it just, I love this photo because look at all those people in all those chairs, and I miss all of you, and I hope that one day we can all reconvene at RTS. So again, Instagram during shelter in place. Harsh. My internet connection is unstable, but we're gonna work through that too. So shelter in place in March, I lost my job around the same time. Been quarantining pretty hard as my partner is immunocompromised and don't really leave the house, but I do come to RTS back and forth. But in the interim, in any downtime, I do participate in doom scrolling, just, and the constant march of like feeling compelled to share infographics about mutual aid, support, anti-racist initiatives, and just that constant stream of like images and information, not knowing what to do with any of it at any moment. Was really struck by something that my partner sent me about free fridges popping up in New York City. And within like minutes, your bubble, everyone kind of shares the same information. A friend of mine was like, let's do this in the Bay Area, why not? So I joined a Signal group. The response was like so overwhelming. It became hundreds of people and so confusing that how do you start and what do you even really do? And in that kind of space, my partner had just recently told me, it's like, well, I sold a tarot reading. We have $50 extra. It's like, well, that's wild because we have no money. I then was like, let's hit Craigslist. Let's find a fridge. Let's do one. Let's figure this out. So met up, didn't really meet up. I'm not here as a representative of Town Fridge. I can only speak to my experience of hosting a fridge in the network. And Town Fridge has made it really explicitly clear that they'd like to remain anonymous, just for the kind of like trolling that happens, but also any kind of retribution or anything like that. So Town Fridge is a network, a loose association of people who are coming together to provide or to operate and maintain free fridges around the East Bay. So moved by this. It happened so quickly. Like I can't even believe it's like, I'm part of it. I feel really inspired by it. And in this time of like shelter in place, quarantine, protests, like making art just seemed like totally impossible for a while. And I was just really just doodling nothing with no purpose, it felt like. But Town Fridge has really kind of like helped me like have a practice of being creative in another capacity that I've found endlessly helpful. And if you are feeling compelled at all to host a fridge or to volunteer or to help, Town Fridge has been amazing. Just wanted to go through a little bit of the rules here. So Town Fridge, some things to think about, and I will list some all the locations coming up in future slides. But with Town Fridge, please, if you're going to donate anything that's perishable, please label and date on the outside of the container. There's limited capacity in the fridge, so if there's anything non-perishable, leave it on the outside, preferably on a shelf. Don't just leave it on the ground. Part of the idea is to keep the fridge, the areas around the fridge is really tidy so that they can't be like, like called like a public hassle or something unsightly for them to eventually get taken down or removed. If a fridge is full, there are other fridges in the network. And if you have the capacity to move food around, please try. And spread the love. If you have a large donation and you need some help, you can always hit up the Town Fridge Instagram, and there's a volunteer sheet. There's a place to sign up. There's ways to get in touch with the network of people to move big donations around. And just please, no raw meat. Just please. I mean, we've gotten some weird donations and I'll get through that in a little bit, but here are the locations. North Oakland, we got 59th and Marshall, and 44th and Telegraph. 44th and Telegraph has been an incredibly busy fridge. There's a lot of people around there, and they'll need, if you have donations in that area, please, please, please. Okay, West Oakland, a lot of places have popped up in West Oakland. There's a new one. The newest one is at West Grand and San Pablo in that like triangle near Brush Street where like the three kind of converge. 28th and Peralta, 26th and Peralta, 16th and West, 14th and Peralta, and 10th and Mandela. And then downtown, there's one at Pro Arts, but it is a little confusing. It was outside of Pro Arts, but naturally, the bureaucratic nature of Oakland shut that one down. I'm not sure if it's even still in operation, but we have one at 10th and Oak in the parking lot of Real Time and Space. In East Oakland, Bartlett and Deering, Fruitvale and East 15th Street, and 76th Avenue and MacArthur. Wanted to talk about my little labor of love. The RTS fridge, AKA the baby fridge, is what we call it in our group text about it here. The location is 125 10th Street, and we do maintain hours for the fridge. Most of the other fridges are 24/7 access, but we don't really want to mess with our landlord and our situation here in an affordable studio space in Oakland, California. Little tenuous, you know, we can't really plan for the future too much, but if you are available in these times to donate at 10th and Oak Street in Oakland, we're so appreciative. And I should say that my co-conspirator in that is Kate Rhodes. Kate and I have divided the week up and take the fridge in and out. Kate Rhodes is my hero. So this is the little baby fridge, and this came together right after that tarot reading Venmo payment went through. And I was like, I found up like a former frat dude who was getting rid of the fridge online, and, you know, met up, grabbed it. I stole some wheels from an old job that I had been released from. And then I used Goo Gone to scrape off all of the Grateful Dead stickers, and then really kind of just quickly attached it with ratchet straps and made a little pantry box on top. I Googled just some other like free fridge things, and then put that out. That was like really the first week of June. I mean, I emailed with the studio to make sure everyone was okay with it being there. Everyone said yes, and I was very excited about that, and we've been in operation since. So this is another sign that we have on the street. It's pretty cute. So there's two cute things that go outside every time we take the fridge out. That's one side of it, and that's the other side of it. Let's see. I'm speaking amazingly fast, but I will take a breath and slow down a little bit. So this was from the first week of the fridge in operation, and we had a really big response in the neighborhood from people coming through. Town Fridge, if at any time the fridge is empty, we can ask them to signal boost on their Instagram, and within, I feel like minutes, or even, people just come, and it's so amazing the outpouring of donations that we get. I do post about the fridge a lot in the stories, and kind of do that through the Real Time and Space Instagram as well. So just kind of the process is that I do buy a lot of stuff for the fridge, but I also have decided that within my artist practice that 15% of sales that I make, if any, because, you know, I'm not really popping, but if I do make sales, like I set that aside, I screenshot, I send that kind of information over to Kate just for accountability, and I do go to the store and I buy things. I currently live in UC Berkeley student housing, and they have a food pantry that's pretty amazing, and it's run by volunteers. It's called the Bear Pantry. I go over there once or twice a week, and just to see if they have anything left over. I mean, it is primarily there to support students in need, but they do get a lot of donations from local grocery stores and places. So at the end of like their shift, I'll go over and grab as much as they'll let me have. With the I send them a lot of photos from the fridge. They're pretty kind of annoyed with me. And then also, like, we've received just kind of like random donations and cash, which has been really interesting. So Kate and I, in that way, just kind of send each other photos of like receipts to make sure that, you know, it's all running, like the numbers add up, just for accountability's sake. And then I just wanted to go through some like successes so far with working or having the fridge outside. I've been in Real Time and Space since 2013, and like have really, I love Oakland Chinatown. I think it's like, single tier. It's a beautiful place. I love it so much. The businesses and all of the people that I see, I've really enjoyed meeting the neighbors who have come through to the fridge. A lot of the people who are coming by are older residents of Chinatown. And then not too far from us are also two tiny home, or what they prefer to call cabin communities. So we've been talking a lot with the people from those cabin communities as to what they would actually like. And they do come through, people come through it all the time. It's amazing. Another success is that like early on, we're like, we need to have an outlet outside, but we shouldn't just have a single plug. It should be as many plugs as we can provide so that people won't unplug the fridge to charge their phones. But then because like we've become this destination that offers like a place to like get to charge your phone or your laptop, we do see a lot of like people every day, which has been a really nice experience. I've been seeing, and part of shelter in place, like I'm at my house or I'm at my studio with my door closed. Like I miss all of you. I do not wish to see you right now, physically co-present, you know, but being outside in the parking lot, I have seen a lot of like artists and art people recently coming by to make donations, and it warms my heart tremendously. And recently, my studio mate Colin surprised us by making this rolling cart for the fridge. Again, maybe it's just the Jocelyn's here. I do feel really emotional, but this like the cart for this fridge, it just blew my mind. I find it so moving, and I really want to thank Colin Dixon for doing that. I also should say that in the neighborhood, we've had a lot of local donations from businesses. To whoever is coming through from Peerless Coffee after the end of their shift and just boosting pastries, I salute you. I love you. Thank you so much. There's a hot dog cart vendor on 3rd and Oak Street who maybe the second week that the fridge was in operation, I opened it and there were like 10 packages of like, he had like bottled water, hot dog, sauce, chips, cried in front of the fridge, found it incredibly moving. Love that guy. And then the Alice Bakery, which is my favorite place to get boba tea by the studio. Also, I go there at the end of the day and they give me things to put in the fridge and I love them. Some difficulties I'd like to share just a little bit about. I'm not to just air my grievances or anything, but just like some difficulties to think about. It's just like, it's hard having set hours in that a lot of the town fridge network is 24/7, so we do miss some donations, and I hope that people are then able to find a location that's open longer. I can't really give as much as I'd like to, just budget wise. So seeing the fridge empty, sometimes just makes me feel like, what are you doing? You don't like, it's just something to think about. And then just the kind of around the neighborhood, just the kind of like endless, like there's the endless need that is around us over everywhere in the world, but it's endless, and it's hard to see all of the suffering around the studio, and then to think about like I'm coming here to express my creative side or whatever, to form some kind of creative like career out of my like genius ideas, just like it's a little much. And then the last thing that there's two more. I have two more actual points. People leaving donations because they're moving. Okay, I mean, I get it. You want to donate those open spices, but it's COVID. So, things that are like sealed, preferred, and a lot of just the food that you buy in the pantry that you don't eat, you buy on a whim. It's like it's making its way. We have so many cans of capers that have made its way here, and like appreciate it, of course, thank you so much. But it's also like capers. And then the last thing is like our reliance on Instagram, and something that I think about a lot just personally, like so it's so much to like use this one platform to boost information, and so Kate and I have, or Kate specifically, has been really good about making posters often and then taking them around the neighborhood so that people can actually see what's going on, as opposed to like our bubbles on our internet platforms kind of like getting sick of seeing our stories and then just kind of passing by them. And then let's see, I just wanted to kind of, oh, this was the best donation that I've seen in a while. These are prickly chayote, and I was just like, wow, like incredible, like to bring fun food to the fridge. What a joy. These are some other places that Kate and I wanted to just promote quickly. We Are the Ones Mutual Care. It's Bay Area queer, trans, indigenous, Black, POC underground creatives who need assistance. I love the people who run this, and they do amazing work. The same with the New World Network. Oh, there's a typo. There should be an L in there. New World Network. They boost people's capital campaigns and GoFundMe that are so close to achieving that goal to get that money. Love. That's something that I've promoted on my Instagram live TV show. And then Poor Magazine and Village Oakland. And then I got a note, like a handwritten note about like some suggested donations that people were interested in the neighborhood. And these are like some things that somebody actually requested. So cans of chili with the pop-off lid, #1, with stars around it, bottled water, potatoes, protein bars. And I should say that most everything has gotten taken. We've had to throw away very little in the way of produce. There's so much need, so it's like very rare that something sticks around on top of the fridge for very long. Things that aren't very popular, just like bags of stuff that's like too big for one person to really want to consume or to even engage with. Mostly the only real thing that we've ever really thrown away is like a 5-pound bag of carrots that would, I get it, you know, I'll separate, of course, but yeah. Okay, so that's what I have. Thank you so much for listening to me stammer. Again, thank you so much for having me, and I'm gonna stop sharing.
Conrad, thank you so much. Wonderful. I'm so inspired and lucky to be in community with you. Thank you. Maneja, would you like to introduce our next and last, but certainly not least, esteemed, wonderful, amazing guest, Lexa, one of my favorite chefs in the Bay.
Absolutely. I also just wanted to say thank you so much, Conrad, for speaking. It was really incredible to see the evolution of your fridge, and I'm really glad. Like it was, I'm really glad that you talked about that reliance on Instagram. I feel like that's something as artists that we're all like really grappling with at the moment. But thank you so much again. Next, I'm going to be introducing Lexa Walsh. Lexa Walsh is an artist, cultural worker, and experience maker. She employs social engagement, radical hospitality, institutional critique, sculpture, installation, and text in her projects, objects, and exhibitions. Her works become places for conversation, storytelling, collecting, and classifying, and address subjects such as value, labor, and power. She founded and organizes Oakland Stock, the Oakland branch of the Sunday Soup Network microgranting dinner series that supports artists' projects and the Bay Area Contemporary Art Archive, among many other projects.
Thank you. First, I just want to say I'm so honored to be on this platform with all of you. And please pardon my what was really cool afternoon light and is now mysterious side lighting. So I'm just going to start with trying to share my screen, get down to it. And okay. So I'll just start with the fact that I'm the youngest of 15 kids. Grew up in Philadelphia, and so being around a big table of people eating is something that I've known since I was a child. And another important moment was living in an anarchist collective radical curatorial project in Czech Republic from the mid-90s to mid-2000s, where I learned how to cook and learned how to cook for up to 100 people for very little money, and learned how to live my politics. So I think that those are two super important things that sort of like boom me into the last 10 or 15 years, where I'm using food and cooking and recipes and recipe exchanges as part of my practice. This is from a project called Meal Ticket. And I think that this kind of sums up the contract that I try to make with participants in projects that I do. In this space, we are equals, we're all students and teachers, we collaborate, we share with trust, we listen with openness, we disagree with respect, we break the rules when necessary, and we know failure is always an option. Oh, I can't. Oh, there we go. So Meal Ticket was, when I was in graduate school in the social practice program at Portland State, I was the caterer for our program, and all of my cohort members were wondering when I was going to start like using food and meals as part of my practice. And so the first project that started that off was called Meal Ticket. I was an artist in residence at the Portland Art Museum in their education department, and did a series of 12 meals over the year for silo busting among staff. We sat in the boardroom, usually reserved for upper management, and I sat people cross-departmentally, and we would do a recipe exchange, and that recipe could be for anything, any set of instructions for anything. And I've continued to do that project and use that recipe exchange as a conversation starter for many years now. I've also done small projects where, say, I'll put a conversation starter in a fortune cookie. This was at the Creative Time Summit in 2012. I've also brought Meal Ticket to specific audiences. This was a 4-month project in a small town in Florida, where I was bringing together elders and trying to address perhaps naively institutional racism in the South, bringing together elder women to exchange recipes. And interestingly, their recipes were often the same with different names, depending on what side of town they were from. I've also used the recipe exchange in the In-Between Tea Talks, which is a project that brings problematic conversations to the forefront over a home-cooked meal. And the idea of sitting people down to have a difficult discussion becomes like exponentially easier with this gracious place setting of food and drink. Here we had artists and activists, Airbnb hosts and tenants' rights activists using different tactics, and then trying to get taxi drivers and rideshare drivers together, but the rideshare drivers didn't show up. But I did have an interesting tea talk with the taxi drivers themselves. This became a book that's both a cookbook and a reader with writers that wrote essays about the experience. This was the installation. It was at Adobe Books. And then a lot of artworks came out of it with text from the talking points. But I really want to spend my time talking about Oakland Stock. So when I was in Portland, I became a guest chef for Portland Stock, which was this part of the Sunday Soup Network. And if you don't know, people are doing this all over the world, where people come for dinner, artists present projects, the people vote on the projects they want to fund, and the artist takes the money and does their work. Here's a map from a few years ago of all of the Sunday soups that were happening. And I've been doing this since 2013, starting at Ratto's in downtown Oakland with about 45 people and few $100 grants, and then moving to Humanist Hall. And now the last one we had was in November of 2019. And the winning amount was over $1,000. And with Oakland Stock, I'm really interested in bringing out a really transparent conversation about what happens with arts funding, because a lot of times it's super opaque. So I ask people to speak to each other at the tables, and also to the artists that are presenting, like, why do you think this is important and fundable? Is it the aesthetics? Is it the social good? Is it the perception of whether the artist needs the money or not? Is it a sense that the person can complete the project? What else? So I think the most important part of Oakland Stock is this conversation that happens over a meal. And then COVID happened and I had to cancel the March 23rd Oakland Stock, which was a bummer. And so I thought a way to just like kind of keep the momentum. And even though I do Oakland Stock only twice a year because it's a lot of work, I just felt like I had lost my work. A lot of people had lost their work, and I felt like we all just need a cup of soup. So I made soup and I offered it on my social media channels. Anybody who wants to get some soup, come pick it up. And they did. And then George Floyd was murdered. And so like suddenly that needed to pivot. And so it pivoted into Soup for Racial and Social Justice. And I collaborated part of the time with a local food share, and other times just sold soup out of my house. And then the first one was I gave people soup and asked them to donate to the George Floyd Memorial Fund. So I don't know how much money they got, but then I had people just come pick up and buy soup for $10 a quart. And after a few weeks of that, it was like, wow, this is a lot of work for $100. So I found through a little investigating some donors who would make a silent matching grant. And then that was a lot easier to not only inspire sales, but also give like more meaningful donations to these organizations. And another thing was to invite people to donate more than $10. Like if you want to pay $25 for your soup, feel free, please do. Here's just some examples. And sometimes my partner would make bread for it, which was great. And I couldn't have done both Oakland Stock and the Soup for Racial Justice without help from volunteers and donations, particularly donations from farms and also from Rados in downtown Oakland. And that was really fast, but that's kind of the story of these things. And I should add that for me, the soup was really about both mutual aid and reparations. And like many white people after George Floyd being murdered, we kind of had a little reckoning with how involved we were with racial justice and how much we thought we had known and how woke we thought we were. So it's an ongoing journey, of course, but. All right.
Thank you so much, Lexa.
Sure.
Wow, I'm just in awe of all of you, and I just want to say it's been so incredible hearing your words and seeing these slides. Just such dynamic work. And Lexa, yes, I agree with you, Conrad. Lexa's food. Whew, your food is. I've had the pleasure of being able to have a seat at the table with Lexa's food, and it's just a delight. But it's now that we will kind of enter into the sort of town hall aspect of this event. We would normally be together as we would sharing food, sharing space, sharing conversations, but we're here on Zoom, and we have collected some questions from our students that we would like to pose to you all as a group. And if you feel so compelled to jump right in and answer the question, that's how we just like to kind of get a dialogue going. And we hope out of this dialogue, again, that as a part 2 of the conversation, we can continue engaging with these topics and questions. So I'll ask the first one, and then Maneja, maybe you can follow up on my first question. But I just want to address the election. And this question is coming from Annika, who's an individualized major at CCA. I've had the pleasure of working with her too, great artist. But she asks, in what ways do you feel the aftermath of the election specifically affects the conditions and environments that allow us to foster community through food. Is there anything that really came up for you this election cycle?
Jocelyn asks if you could repeat it one more time.
Sure. So we have Annika, who's an individualized major at CCA. And we want to just kind of focus in and hone in on aspects of the election and the election cycle. And wondering if she's wondering, in what ways do you feel the aftermath of the election affects conditions and environments that allow us to foster community through food?
I'm going to interlope.
That as well, just in case anyone wanted to.
I was about to say,
Sita.
Sita's here.
Sita's here. I'm so sorry. I'm not paying attention to the chat. I'm so
No,
sorry.
no, it's
Sita,
all good.
People's Kitchen Collective is with us, co-founder. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, thanks for letting me slide on in for a second, and was able to catch most but not all, which was really wonderful. And and that question that you asked, I've been thinking about one, the what has been changed under the Trump administration, under an already tight and problematic and food system. And I will say, like, Esperanza, who is the former director of the Oakland Food Policy Council, would say the system is not broken. It actually functions very well in the service of the people who are making a profit from it. The one thing I will say is that there was recently, in the last, like literally in the days following the election, the administration passed a law that basically transferred, quote unquote, money to farmers. And the way that they did that is that they froze wages for essential farm workers, migrant farm workers, freezing them at below $15 an hour. I think it's 13 point something for the next few years. And it is something that is reversible by Biden, but will take, they think, up to a year. And that's if it doesn't fall through the cracks, right, with all of the other things that are kind of mounting. And so, I think that, for me, it's like, we've deemed people essential workers. And then we're not only not compensating them accordingly, but we're actually saying that we're going to, quote unquote, transfer the money that they are not able to legally make to the owners of these farms, is just like, it's wretched. So, and I think it's just one example of like many different kinds of policies. So I think, like there is kind of a more, I think there is this kind of more conceptual, kind of element of breaking bread and what that means, that maybe someone else can speak to. But I think, for us as people who are engaged in food systems work, and as, people who are looking out to see like, okay, what actually is to go in with eyes open. And, like I'm looking for who has like the Google Doc of lists of like all the things that we need to keep track of to make sure that they actually get reversed, that they actually, those changes, because people are like, well, it can be, yeah, it can be, but we need to hold the people in power accountable. So that's what I wanted to jump in with.
Yes, amen. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Other thoughts from our esteemed group of contributors to this conversation on that subject of the election and the implications of the election on the work?
I'm sort of regretting that I was not doing a series of tea talks during this election time, because I feel like if there were ever a chance to get these very different and angry sides together at the table, it would be over food. And that would be like this platform where we could attempt to have conversation. And maybe it's not possible, but I feel like over a gracious setting of food, you can like dig at little bits. I also think that it's important to not have gang mentalities. Like this is when you have really angsty opinions, it's, I think, a better situation to have intimate conversations rather than trying to have large tables where there's a potential for this gang and this gang to speak party lines as opposed to get down to individual even places where one could meet. And I'm not interested in necessarily meeting to get along, but meeting to understand.
Thank you for that, Lexa.
Did someone else want to go, Conrad or Larissa? I didn't want to monopolize since Sita already spoke, but you know, I'm raging over here, so.
Go right ahead, Jocelyn, go right ahead.
Okay. So there is this experience that we're having, and I want to be really clear about what it looks like and feels like. This election did not determine whether or not people were going to stop killing us. And so I think that needs to be the bottom and front and top and center line of these conversations, because this change in administration fundamentally didn't change the intention to kill Indigenous and Black and Brown folks. And so if that's the baseline that we're working with, and that's the fire that we're standing in, how we approach this moment is all to do with this idea of artists as first responders that Ashara Ekundaya definitely brought up as a reality of artist responsibility in our society. We see things because we're part of the peoples that are most impacted, and we also can make things seen by others. And so when we're talking about these food projects that are in this wheelhouse of social practice, I also talk about social responsibility, because we can do our projects that are essential, that are mutual aid, that are small and within community. But what I'd like to tag on to Sita's response is that we have the opportunity to match what we're doing on the streets with what accountability is required for people to stop being killed. And so when that comes down to being watchdog groups, when it comes down to not scaling, but creating relationships with other mutual aid groups that are small in order to create a collectivized web that is impenetrable by government and state action and violence, that's where I want us to take this. I want us to be in the aesthetic of revolution. And that feels like the imperative that is necessary in order for us to really overcome the fact that no matter the administration, there is never a direct acknowledgement of the repair and healing and accountability that has to happen for our society's wrongdoing. And when I say wrongdoing, I mean evil. And so I want us to feel the fire every time we're doing these projects.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Thank you. Does anyone want to continue on that note before we ask our next question? Because that is a powerful statement that I think we need to sit with, but I just want to be able to allow for comment and response.
I just wanted to, I can't even wrap my mind around this election cycle. I feel so, and it doesn't feel like much changed. It does. I do feel like that fear that like the kind of on the way out for 45, the kind of like evil that is still possible is kind of like keeps me up a lot. So I don't really necessarily have an answer or anything for that person other than like just to, I don't even know. Vigilance is important, but also like I can't wrap my mind around it currently.
That's fair, Conrad. It's a lot. It can be a lot to take in all at once. So many different pieces to this maddening puzzle, right? Any thoughts, Larissa, on your end?
Well, yeah, I'm just like very moved by what you're both saying. But I think just like the only thing that I'll kind of say is I saw like a lot of like white folks in my community take a deep breath out and kind of like felt like the fight was over. And wow, I'm like actually getting emotional. It was so heartbreaking for me to see, because I felt like, no, this is like when we need to start working. We need to like really, really start working. So Yeah, I'll just say that, like, I just like keep holding each other accountable.
Thank you. Maneja, do you want to carry on with the next question?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for all your thoughts. Some very, very potent statements, very real statements. And just kind of going off of what Larissa just said about holding each other accountable and just thinking about how this isn't really a time to like rest or pause or feel like happy necessarily, but it's a time to actually start doing the work because there's people who are really going to be affected by it. The next question I'd like to bring up is from Clara, who is an individualized major alumni from CCA. And the question is, what does being an organizer mean to you? If anyone has any thoughts and would like to jump in.
I'm a person who'll go first, so I'll just do it. I want to say something really specific to that piece around being an organizer, because it took me a long circuitous path to get to self-identifying as that. I actually began my education in the Midwest and didn't realize until for me, embarrassingly late, how much uneducation I really needed to do in order to decenter whiteness in my life. And that started when I went to undergrad, but I studied fine art in undergrad. I went immediately to law school, and then I did a 2-year stint in Peace Corps in Mali, West Africa, and then I did a master's program in environmental education. Why does one person do all those things? It's because we live in a multidisciplinary shit show, and I'm just going to just cuss once. And there is a real requisite for us to be multidisciplinary in response. And so I really want to identify the need for us to have a multiplicity of approaches within any single individual in order to be agile and adaptive enough to shift to the need of any present social unrest or social justice issue. And so I'm really grateful that I had that nonlinear path, but it took me a while to identify that food was the through line of all of those different disciplines for me. It's the way that I could communicate, and it's the way that I could organize. And it's because a collective, really essential, the relationship with Sita and Sakib, to this idea of being organizers within community. So it is something that feels really dynamic, and it also is something that feels necessary to get real with in a ritual kind of calling on your ancestors kind of way, to get directions and to really download the responsibility that comes with all of us taking on that identification. We're organizing, whether it's our own families or it's our communities or it's our society. If we're organizers, it means we're movement building. It means that we are taking on the responsibility and also building the capacity to meet the needs of our, again, family, community, society at large. So being an organizer was a really important part of me really stepping into what it means to center the lived experience of Black and Brown folks as an essential part of recovering our society to a place that is human as opposed to dehumanizing.
One would wonder, Jocelyn, how many emails you and your team get on a daily basis. I mean, it's like also how many people do you have to interface with to be able to have a table of hundreds of people? Can you talk a little bit about that? How do you do all of that? How do you have hundreds of people at one table? How do you coordinate hundreds of bags for people who need food?
That is the heart of the question, and one that Larissa, Lexa, Conrad, all of us can answer, because Larissa, the boxes, love your boxes. I'm a box aficionado, like that's a real thing. Conrad, I saw you list off 12 fridges. Those fridges came from somewhere. With those rollies, I'm sorry, but having a caster life, like having those coasters, caster wheels on there, that's next level, right? And Lexa, like a quart of soup, storing hundreds of quarts of soup. Like these are major logistical moments, right? And that's a major part of organizing, is having the resources, yes, but it's having the relationships. I'm always going to come back to relationships. Moving that many people or getting that many people at a table is about the fact that we've been around for over 10 years, building relationships to the point that people will do things that are against their best interest in a good way. And by that, I mean, when you have volunteers that are willing to be there at midnight and 4 a.m., that's when you can really essentially get some of these things that are so hard to plan for when it's an emergent experience and when it's a free experience for that matter. And so really having people that are heart-centered, we're tending to the whole person when it comes to volunteers. We have monthly calls with our core set of volunteers because of that. We are dealing with the whole person when we're talking about the guests that are at our table. When we reach out, our outreach process and the people that support that outreach and that big old spreadsheet, you know, that it's engaged in order to do that, it is heart-centered. It is, we remember being connected to you through this person or through this organization 5 years ago, and we want you to be at this table. Your presence is important because of this. And it is an essential part of all of these movements of people and things and all these logistics that people know that we care so much that our tears will flow, you know, based on whether they're there or not at a table. And so that is something that feels so important to organizing in general. If there is not a sense of connection and truth and trust in those relationships, we're not going to be steadfast. We're not going to be in a situation where we are sustainable. And I want to add another layer to that, which is we brag about the fact that we actually have a collective, a therapist for our collective.
Oh,
like
wow.
Something real about communication. We say communication, that's a lovely thing to say. However, what does that mean? What does it mean to do a therapist appointment before you do a project and then do one after? Because we as individuals have to resource ourselves to process that experience, to be prepared for that experience. That's an essential part of capacity building, is knowing that we are connected. Our friendship is solidly founded on something that is, again, heart-centered. So that's a little bit, I could go forever on that one, but that's a little bit. Thank you for that question, Sam.
Thank you, Jocelyn. And you know, I do want to direct this, not to put you on the spot, Larissa, but I do want to talk to you about this question too, because you said in your presentation that this was a new first step, almost first couple of months, and we're catching you at the beginning of this important work that you've decided to make your practice, your life, your work. I feel so excited for you. So can you tell us a little bit more about what it means to be an organizer to you right now at the beginning stages of your work?
Yeah. I feel like the last few months or the last few years, really, I've sort of like grappled with my relationship to like making objects as an artist versus working in the field of like social practice, and like what's the difference between social practice and like community work and mutual aid work. And I mean, the last 4 years I've like primarily worked in education, and I found like being an educator a way to sort of like work in all these different fields. But as I said when I was talking earlier, I really feel like my relationship with gardening completely transformed my life. And like I think what Jocelyn was talking about of like food being the connection from all of these different facets of my life, that realization just happened for me. And it's like it's the most profound realization I've ever had in my entire life. So I don't think I would necessarily consider myself an organizer yet. I would like to get there, and I'm working to be there. And I feel like for the first time, I feel good about the work that I'm doing. And yeah. That's all.
Well, you know, Larissa, you know, if you need me at the farm, I'm there. You know,
yeah. Anytime.
Okay,
Anytime.
Great. Conrad, I want to point to you for a second, because you're in a collective you know, we're in a collective together at the studio. You're in a collective in your art practice. And now you're working with an anonymous or a group that would like to remain anonymous, a set of people who are putting these fridges out into the world. So is your role as organizer still in the artist lane, or how are you thinking about this?
Well, I just wanted to, I've been thinking a lot about, since this question was posed, the idea of like a decentralized network, and that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. Also within like the kind of way that I make artwork, I personally hate making artwork alone. I think it's like, I mean, I do it. It's kind of like a sense of therapy or something, but like I much prefer to work with other people. And with my work with Bonanza, it's always been about us kind of challenging the idea of the heroic artist. Like there's the three of us. You don't really know who makes what or who does what. We just know that all together that we accomplish like big things, you know, brag. But also within the kind of idea of Town Fridge as well, it's like a decentralized network because it's safer. There's more possibility in that. There's no real hierarchy, which is something that like trying to then remove from my mind's eye. So I have been thinking a lot about like a decentralized sensibility in that way for organizing. And you know, I just organize through my phone, really. It just feels like it's text messages, it's group chat, it's like all these different apps. It's really funny to me. There's like no hierarchy of them either, which is really funny, really strange. It's like, where did that message go? I don't know. It might be on Signal or WhatsApp or Instagram or Twitter. I don't know.
There's too many platforms, too many.
It's just like, yeah, it's like, it's nice to kind of spread it out amongst different platforms and then kind of think about that, how things get spread up amongst other people. And that has so much to do with like adoration and trust, I think really helps in that way.
Thank you so much. And Lexa, I feel like you wear so many different hats when it comes to your own interdisciplinary practice. Is organizer one of them?
For sure. I really want to comment on Conrad for 1 second about collaboration, because there's something that I just feel I need to say, that a good collaboration to me is not like a salad. Instead, it's like a cake. So some collaborations have individual elements that you could pull out, but a truly great collaboration goes through a chemical change and then becomes a new thing. And so you can't even pull out those elements. And I just think that, yeah, collaboration can be so amazingly beautiful and difficult. Yes, I am so much an organizer. And in fact, it's actually become a blessing during COVID that I can do non-organizing things, because there's a lot not to organize right now. So I'm doing ceramics, which is just my own practice by myself, making shit. It's beautiful and so healing for me because I was feeling like an event planner as my art practice, which that just gets to be kind of old, and the passion and the joy of the art making kind of goes away because of all of the stuff you have to keep in order and people. That said, I'm obviously okay at organizing, and I'm able to organize socially engaged projects. I'm able to organize Oakland Stock and various things, but I appreciate the time that I now have to not organize and to be alone. And it's a kind of new thing for me.
Right, because we all need to take care of ourselves amidst all of this as well. A lot of you all, I consider you all to be first responders. I'm a huge fan of Ashara as well, and you are engaging with a lot of different people and just a lot of different kinds of moments that involve interaction. Even though we're socially distanced, when you're working with food, you still have to be careful, right? And so our next question comes from Melanie, who's in studio art and environmental studies, actually. And they want to know, how can we get government funding to recognize community gardens as an important source of food, rather than solely focusing on providing ready-made foodstuffs? So this is a conversation, I want to just expand on that question too, and think about how you all are engaging with, let's say, canned items, or, items that aren't organic per se, or these kinds of things, versus, farm to table, produce, right, picked right out of the soil kinds of opportunities. So how are you navigating that?
Jocelyn, stop me if you mentioned this already, but Janaki Jagannath, who is one of the founders of the agroecology program in the Central Valley, talks about food justice as being this kind of spectrum. So talking about, on the one hand, you have food security, which has to do with survival, the kind of maybe the canned goods, the like people are hungry, how do we meet that need? And then food justice, which is kind of in this in-between gray scale, between how do we get more access to, how do we get food and people together to meet that need? And then food sovereignty, which is really about how do we create this kind, our own sustainable systems for the ways that we support ourselves in culturally appropriate ways that that also consider cultural survival along with physical survival. And to me, I mean, the reason I'm in the food game for the culture, right? Like, if you kind of take that part out of it, I'm like kind of interested. But and I think that what the interesting thing was in this last distribution that we just did in October, and I think the really brilliant thing that Jocelyn led, was that she was like, look, we actually don't have overlapping parts of our community. We have that might intersect kind of more freely in Little Bobby Hutton Park. But this year, unhoused folks are over here. The folks who, would dial onto a Zoom call are over here, and the youth at Defremery Park are over here. So we need to serve all of them. And it kind of put us into, we don't usually engage with a food security question, to be totally honest. Like, we're kind of more on the food sovereignty end. And so we were in a position where kind of for the first time, we were like looking at canned goods, from the Alameda Food Bank. And because, and I think the question actually is really interesting, just recognizing people's access in encampments to cooking equipment. It's like not helpful if you show up at an encampment with bread, more, like usually, and so how, and people were excited about actually like the juices that were in there. I heard also we did a distribution of flowers too, which was really important. I think Sakib was the one who had suggested that. And again, like something that's biodegradable won't take up space, won't create kind of waste problems, if it decays. Some, just being mindful of like all of those different considerations when there aren't services, social services, right, and infrastructure set up near or in encampments intentionally, right? So yeah, so I think, I did have a moment where I was like, oh wow, like we usually are trying to like call, Kristen Leach at Second Generation Seed and being, and we did, and she contributed, amazing mustard seeds for the cook along bags. But I think that somebody said to me, actually, I think Janaki said this, or maybe it was Hivo actually said this, that we can't get to sovereignty unless we address security, right? And I think that's also what was so beautiful about the Panthers, is that they really were like, you cannot sit and learn with a hunger rumbling in your belly. Like, and while we're at it, we're going to show you why it is that you don't have food. We're going to show you, expose the systems as to like who's keeping, who's withholding food from us. We're going to pressure the systems in providing food for all school children in need. And we're also going to serve things like grits. And we're going to talk about the South and the Great Migration. And those were 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds, doing that across the country every day. So yeah, that's kind of, So it doesn't specifically kind of with the community gardens, but I think it's part of a really necessary strategy. But it's like always part of this kind of this bigger constellation for me.
Thank you, Sita. I wonder, Larissa, can you hop in for a second? Because all of your produce was straight from the garden. So who did the boxes land with, and what was that process, and how was that worked out? Did you hear from the folks who got those boxes?
Yeah, so a lot of the figuring out of who was actually received them was done through 2727. So Lydia just posted on Instagram, like any Black resident of the East Bay or San Francisco can take one of these boxes. So it was really just the first 15 people who responded. And then I think she sort of like kept a list, and then they were delivered by volunteers.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do want to get to one question that I feel is very important, because we're all artists here. We're all visual artists. We've gone to art school. We make things, and certain artists have been commissioned to work with you all, and I find it so exciting. I'm seeing Emory Douglas involved. I'm seeing Lucchesa Branfenverismo, who's a CCA alum, involved in these projects. There's Dignidad Rebel Art that I think was also involved in People's Kitchen Collective, and of course with Real Time and Space. You know, Conrad as an artist. I just wonder, how are we, and then CCA's motto is make art that matters. So how are we navigating the visual component of the food and the making and the visceral connection that we have to our food with, let's say, imagistic representation, posters, flyers, ephemera, this kind of thing? I'm just wondering, how are we thinking about visual representation in all of this?
I'll go first again. I ain't scared.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
I'm bringing into the chat a piece of ephemera right now from the free breakfast program. And as an example, one of our beautiful contributions, often from Miss Sita over here, is a program for our community meals. And that program is something that illuminates not just the menu, which would be typical, or the program. It also illuminates the politic. And it's a place for historical context. It's a place for an aesthetic engagement with the topic through some artistic intervention that is carried out through our volunteer crew. It is a representation of all the collaborators that we work with. And we really appreciate creating a program for each of our projects, because it does offer an opportunity to be a resource and a tool to continue beyond the invent or the intervention. And that's a key part of what it means to be a PKC experience. We do not want people's good feelings to reside only in the place that we cultivate or curate. We want it to activate outside of that space and go to the streets. And so this is one of those small leverage points that we can offer to facilitate that type of experience. And it has this engagement that is thoughtfully, again, created with this idea of collaborators in mind. And so it means something when you can go back to your house and recreate the playlists. It means something when you can go back and go to the Oakland Library and follow up on that news article about the Black Panther Party. Those things are part of your life then, as opposed to simply being a one-off experience.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for saying that, because I want Lexa to hop in for a second. Lexa, I have one of your cookbooks, and it's not just a cookbook of recipes, it's a cookbook of ideas and innovations, and it's sort of diaristic. Can you talk about the, I mean, it's an homage to San Pablo, and that corridor. I wonder if you can talk about your relationship to print and image as well.
Sure. I think that I was probably in my grad program trained to not even think about being an artist. Like we were trying, I feel like it was like, get the artist out of you and just do the work, which I regret. And still to this day, I'm trying to get that back in. But with the cookbook projects, I will always use like the beautiful opportunity of multiples to then share. It's like an archive to me, and I'm very, if you know me and my practice, the other half of my practice is all about archives. So it's a way to bring home the conversation that we had and the experience that we had. It's not necessarily meant to be useful as a practical cookbook, but instead as a piece of ephemera from our experience, and also a collection of who we are as a community for that hour that we had a meal together. Potentially for the San Pablo cookbook, I was able to work with Kala as a print public resident, so I got to learn how to use the Vandercook press and learn how to do polymer plate letterpress, which was such a cool and completely impractical way to make that cookbook. It was a collection of recipes from workers along San Pablo and the Berkeley, Oakland border area. And it was, painstakingly, I printed every page, and it was this beautiful thing to have this book, but it was not like, there's a question of printing by hand versus getting it mass printed, and hiring a designer versus letting the homemade aesthetic of somebody's handwriting. These are all choices that we make. And in that case, I really let that be, like, I'm really interested in the community cookbook history and the community cookbook aesthetic. So even though it was hand printed, it was really in the community cookbook aesthetic with spiral binding and people's handwriting.
Yeah, I just love looking at it. I'm so glad that you made it, even though it was difficult. I'm glad that it exists.
Joy, but it was just practical.
Yes, and I do want to give the floor to either Conrad or Larissa if you have any thoughts, because you all maybe are not wanting to necessarily design or brand what it is you're doing, or maybe I'm wrong about that. What are your thoughts?
Well, again, taking it back to how we exist in the social media place, and how Instagram is just a marketplace. Like, I do feel like specifically Town Fridge's graphic design, amazing, very brand forward. It has like a streetwear vibe about it that I feel just kind of like rings of success in some way, and I really do appreciate it. And then like a lot of the mutual aid networks that I'm into have this like really pronounced and futuristic, optimistic graphic design aesthetic that I just find to be like really beautiful. It's like a little bit like 1999. It's like fisheye lens. It's like a little like polychromatic car paint. I love it. I think it's so beautiful.
That's awesome. So is there one person who is designated designer? We don't know. Okay. Okay. It's all, we have no clue where this aesthetic is coming from.
No, I don't want to, I can't speak on that. I mean, I guess
Okay.
it's like, it is by committee, I guess, but it is kind of also like like something just needs to get made, I'm going to make it.
Right.
Kind of like there's a quickness about it, but also like, then again, like trust, and then you're going to make something amazing. But like, I don't organize with Town Fridge. I just work with my fridge, and we have a very hand painted sign vibe about the way that we do it.
Love it. Yes, it's fantastic. And Larissa, do you have any goals around this, or are you just gonna kind of keep it hand that side to 2727, or not sure?
Yeah, it's funny because it's not actually something I've thought about too much, but I think like something that's like really I've been thinking about a lot is there's this quote by Jenny Odell, who I think is a Bay Area based writer, and she writes in her book How to Do Nothing, like I could never create something as beautiful as like what is just in the world already, like, and that like comes from like found objects or like just the produce. So like a lot of the photos I would post are just like of the garden.
Yes.
And I think in the future I would love to like actually get people interacting with the garden, like when COVID stops. And yeah, I think like as far as like the Oxbow garden in general, like I would really like to continue that as a mutual aid garden. Like the institution in general is like at a strange place. So I think like the idea of collaborating with pre-existing organizations in the Bay who are like making meals, like that sounds really exciting to me, and was my original idea, but we just didn't have enough to really like make that worthwhile. So yeah, like collaborating more in future.
That's great. I love this conversation. You all are fantastic. You are so, so amazing. Thank you all. Can we just, I think there was a request to copy and save the chat for these resources and these
I've done
amazing.
it. I have the whole thing copy pasted.
Thank you,
Yeah.
darling. Thank you, Maneja. You're on it. Thank you. Maneja, I have to say again, you were the person who initiated this idea to bring these incredible people together. Thank you very much. I want to close out tonight with Jocelyn Jackson. Jocelyn has offered up a song for us. So let's close out tonight with Jocelyn. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for gathering us together. It feels so good in virtual spaces to be able to do that since we can't do it in person. But one of the things that's also a hallmark of PKC events is to bless each experience with a song. It's one of my family traditions. And so just to have that moment of acknowledging how sweet it was to hear all of your tender moments, like for us to be in our emotion tonight and to be vulnerable. I just want to share this song to know that is something that was felt and will be continued even as we leave this virtual space. I love you. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. Blessings, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you, Lexa. Thank you, Larissa. And thank you, Conrad. Sita, special guest. Thank you for dropping in. And also, Maneja, again, thank you, Jamie, Brandice, and everyone in the CCA community who has made this possible and has contributed to this work across the Bay Area in our community. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for part 2, where we will be engaging around these questions and topics of food, justice, and trying to move forward as a community to address the most difficult pieces of society, which is survival and taking care of each other. So thank you so much. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Maybe I'll see you soon on Zoom. Okay. Thank you all. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you all so much.